our timeline starts July 18th, 2007, in the morning between 8:30 and 9 a.m. Barbara had volunteered to take their friend of her husband, Carl. Let me start that over again.
Okay.
I butchered that.
Okay.
Barbara volunteered to take a friend of her husband, Carl, Jim Ramaker, who is age 58, from California, on a relatively easy hike up to the overlook in the Bitterroot Mountains. Carl's cousin, who's a female, was feeling the effects of one too many drinks from the night before, and she decided she didn't want to go hiking that day. So Carl was still sleeping when Barbara came and told him she and Jim were going hiking to the overlook. So the last thing Carl told Barbara before she left was to not worry about dinner, that he'd take care of it. So the road leading up to the Bear Creek trailhead was closed that day for repairs when they arrived. So they ended up parking a short distance away and had to walk through the construction zone to get to the trail. Once they reached the trail, they completed the 2.7-mile hike to the scenic overlook located at the top of the trail. So now let's fast forward to around 11 a.m. on the same day. So Jim and Barbara had sat down at the top, and they're having a snack and kind of, taking in the sights and scenes. They ended up seeing two other hikers that morning and exchanged pleasantries. They were already at the overlook, and they had a dog with them. Then they spent about 30 minutes kind of just simply enjoying the view, taking it in. Obviously, they're not like us when they're hiking. They're out there for a pleasure hike, not one of our hikes where we're trying to kick the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
So
that sounds about right.
Yeah, so around 11:30 a.m., they decided to start heading back down the trail. Jim stopped briefly to get one final look at the view. He estimated that Barbara was probably about 20 or 30 feet in front of him at that time. When Jim turned back around, now this is very strange, and when we get into theories, I've got all kinds of theories on this case. So Jim turned back around to continue down the trail, maybe 45 seconds. Barbara was gone. No sight of her.
And so she was still at the overlook.
No, so they they were starting to head back down.
Okay, so they're on their way down from the overlook. Okay.
And Jim, now this is all alleged because no one else was there. Jim said he briefly stopped to take in one final look at the view, and Barbara was about 20 or 30 feet ahead of him. And when he turned around to kind of start walking back down, she was gone.
That's wild.
Yeah, and he said that it was maybe no more than 45 seconds. So very, very bizarre. So Jim then continued walking further down the trail, assuming that he would soon run into Barbara once he got to the bottom, but he was unable to locate her. So Jim and Barbara had been on a part of the trail that was covered in very loose shale rock that crunched really loud when you walked. We've hiked on that kind of stuff before.
Yes.
You could hear people coming from pretty far away on that stuff.
Yeah, I'm guessing you mentioned that because it's like, okay, if she's somewhere else, I'd hear her walking around.
So he ended up taking a whistle out, and he tried to use the whistle to attract Barbara's attention. No response. Confused, he continued the downward trek, hoping that he would find Barbara somewhere along the trail. And, of course, there was no sign of her. So now it's about midday. I don't have a specific time for the next couple of bullet points, but Jim reached the trailhead without finding any sign of Barbara. So at this point, he doesn't know what to do. So he approached the construction site, which now has workers on it, and asked the workers if they had seen Barbara exit the trail. They had not. So the Forest Service crew was busy digging up the roadway when a pair of young men in their early 20s came strolling into the work site. One of the men was considerably darker skinned than the other. So I'm jumping back a little bit in the morning. So we have verification from the construction workers that the two men that Jim and Barbara saw at the top of the overlook are real. So those two guys were there.
Okay.
So they went on to say that by the time the crew arrived for that day, there was already a pair of vehicles parked at the road closure sign. So we've got Jim's vehicle that Jim and Barbara came in. and a light-colored older SUV that could have been a Chevrolet Blazer with Missoula County license plates. So they're assuming that the other car was belonging to the two gentlemen that went through the construction site and eventually met up with Jim and Barbara at the top.
Okay.
So, like I said, the workers were called to Jim seeing the two young men accompanied by a black and white dog, but not Barbara. The construction workers were able to describe these two guys, and they actually had, in our show notes, Joe, I've got a kind of, they put like not a wanted sign, but they put a, like trying to locate a witness sign.
Okay. Like a person of interest?
Yeah, not even a person of interest. Like they just really wanted to find these two guys to just kind of try to get more information on the case. So the construction workers actually had pretty good descriptions of the gentlemen. They were well-tanned, average fit young guys. They walked right through the construction site. They stopped and talked to the construction guys for a bit. The crew remembered a black collie-like dog with white markings that enjoyed a few moments in the creek. Since that morning was already turning pretty hot.
And for those watching the video, I got it up on the screen.
Yeah. So one of the guys in his early 20s, they don't have a sketch of him, but the other guy...
Oh, so he doesn't look like that?
Just a round
just
circle,
a circle
with a question mark. Yeah. So, yeah, the other guy, they have a pretty good sketch of him, and they actually have a picture of an SUV similar to what they thought was parked there and a dog similar to what they had. So pretty interesting. I don't think we've ever seen like a wanted witness sign before.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen that.
No, so this is the first time we've seen it on one of our cases. I'm sure they've done it before.
Yeah.
So one of the construction workers ended up escorting Jim through the construction zone to his car so he could check to see if Barbara had somehow made it to the car without being noticed, but she wasn't there. And there wasn't any sign of her being there that morning. So Jim went on to say that it was hard to believe that Barbara had gotten lost on a trail that she knew so well. He was convinced that he must have just missed her. He hiked back to the trailhead and retraced the path they had taken to the scenic overlook. And there was absolutely no sign of her anywhere along the trail when he went back up the trail. So
I couldn't find it when you were talking. That's what I was scrolling through. I was looking at the All Trails comments. But I read a ton of them earlier today just to get an idea of what the trail was like.
Yeah.
A lot of them talked about how well groomed the trail was.
Okay.
So I definitely don't think you would get lost on it. There are several comments of like, because sometimes when you get like these trails that have tons of trees and stuff in them, you can have some overgrowth. You could kind of maybe get lost. And there's more than a few that talked about how well groomed it was and how easy it was to get up and back.
Okay.
So I wanted to throw that out there in case people are like, hey, maybe she went off. Because sometimes, I think we did that case on that kid who we think was skipping switchbacks.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you can sometimes get lost.
Yep.
I doubt she was doing that, and it was well groomed.
No, and her husband made the comment that she never really veered off trail, which is something Joe and I always tell people to, not to do. Like you don't want to just, A, it destroys the natural environment, and B, it's not, the safest thing to do. The trail's there for a reason because it's groomed and it's going to keep you safe. You go off trail, you don't know what terrain you're walking on. It's very easy to get turned around in, thick forests. So, her husband said she never would do that. So, I think it's safe to assume that she probably stayed on the trail. So, like we said, Jim had gone back up the trail to see if there was any sign of her. He didn't see that. So he made his way back down to the construction zone and told the construction workers that he needed help because he still couldn't find Barbara. So one of the construction workers let him use his phone so he could call and report Barbara missing. So now it is noon. So we're there's a little bit of dual timelines here. So now we are back with Carl at their house. So it's noon on the 18th, and Carl's cousin is starting to get a bit antsy that Barbara and Jim hadn't returned because, like we said, this is about a 2-hour trail, and they were just going to go up to the overlook, come back, and then come home, and they had left at like 8:30 in the morning. I believe when I looked it up, it's about a 44-minute drive, so you leave it, say you left at 9, you get there at 9:45, 2-hour I mean, it's very possible you're back by lunchtime.
Yeah.
Perfect scenario. So, Carl's cousin's getting antsy that they haven't returned. However, Carl at this point was never concerned. He remembered, his wife was an avid hiker. She kept herself fit by running, riding, and taking long walks into the mountains. And, he said as an added bit of insurance, she had her .357 Magnum on her. So not only is she...
keep going.
Sorry. Oh, yeah.
I was going to make a comment, and then I stopped, and I saw I made you hesitate.
No.
Sorry.
So, and it sounds like she probably knew how to use the gun, too.
Yeah, I was going to say she seems like she knew what she was doing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people that live out in the western states, like Montana, Idaho, they're all very proficient in firearms. And
well, just the area, too. You kind of have to be.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about, too, if you live way out in the middle of nowhere and something's happening on your property to you or your property, you can call 911, but it might take them an hour to get there.
Sure.
You've got to be able to protect yourself. So I think it's important to know that she had this gun with her, so she could protect herself from an animal attack, but she could also theoretically protect herself from a human attacking her.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that makes this even more perplexing. And we'll get in. I really want to get to theories, so I should breeze through the timeline because I think there's a lot of really cool not cool, but interesting theories on what happened.
Okay.
So fast forward to about 1:30 in the afternoon now. Carl's cousin now is getting very scared that Barbara and Jim haven't returned yet. And Carl continued to try to calm her down and reassure that, Barbara is very proficient in the wilderness, but another hour passed, and Carl's cousin was like, you've got to call somebody and report her missing. This is too long. And sure enough, out of the blue, at 2:30, roughly 2:30, a Forest Service law enforcement officer called Carl to inform her that his wife, Barbara, had been reported missing.
Jeez, that's going to be so terrible. Like, you're already nerve-wracked, and then you just kind of get slammed with the reality that it's happening.
It's almost like Carl's cousin kind of like felt something was wrong all morning. Like, she was antsy, and
I believe in that stuff. Like, people with close connections, just like something feels off the whole time. And
So, since the Bear Creek Overlook Trail is located within the Bitterroot National Forest, the case was initially handled by the U.S. Forest Service Rangers, and I only put that in there because we have taken heat before about just kind of nonchalantly glossing over who manages what areas.
Oh, we have.
You remember that?
I haven't. Oh, no.
Yeah, we did a case where it was like right on the border of a national park and a national forest, and we got the agency wrong, and someone actually got mad. So,
do they cancel their Patreon over it?
No, I don't.
We've had people cancel over getting information like that wrong.
So
that's all right. I don't remember that one.
So, it was early on.
Yeah.
So Carl told the officer that he would meet him at the Bear Creek Trailhead, which was about a 20. One of the articles I read said 20-mile drive from their house. So, the search for Barbara pretty much kicked off pretty soon, like that afternoon, and it continued into the night. And Carl actually was waiting at the trailhead entrance until midnight when police finally convinced him to go home and get some rest. He just didn't want to leave in case they found something. So the search went for roughly 2 weeks this is a rough estimate on dates, July 18th to August 1st of 2007. And it was a very, a physical search. They deployed, the sheriff's department deployed search teams, brought in highly trained dogs, called in a high-tech infrared helicopter to scour the area. Volunteers and professional search and rescue groups had completed grid searches of the entire area. We've gone over how this is done in previous episodes, but basically they tie off squares of the forest with, bright-colored, like surveyor.
Yeah. They grid it out like a map almost.
Grid it out,
say, like, hey, this square's been searched.
Yep.
What's crazy is like it's 2007, so I'm trying to think of like the technological advancements at the time. So they like had infrared and helicopters. Cell phones were just kind of starting to become mainstream.
They were pretty mainstream by 2007.
Yeah. Like everybody. I know, but I'm just saying. Like I
had one.
Yeah. Oh, you did?
I mean, iPhones came out around then.
Oh, I was poor. I didn't have anything.
But no, I think the only thing that probably is different from then to now is the use of drones. I don't think there were any drones in use in 2007.
Yeah, it's the year my daughter was born, my first kid. So 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we had cell phones then.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was like earlier, like I was almost in high school, and then I forgot that I graduated.
So, yeah, they did a very thorough search. In all, thousands of search hours were logged by the Ravalli County and Missoula County search and rescue teams, volunteers, law enforcement, life flight, care flight, the Montana Air National Guard, the Forest Service, and like we said, that helicopter is actually provided by Homeland Security. So they had a lot of equipment out in the field, and I'll get into some law enforcement comments a little bit later, but this forest area where they were hiking is not that dense. So,
yeah, you can see the ground a lot through the satellite and the trees. You can see, like, it seems... Oh, I'll pull it up on the screen.
Yeah.
But for those that are just listening, like, it's forested on the side of the mountain, but, like, it's thinning. It's like a man slowly thinning his hair. Like, you can start seeing a lot of the scalp through. Like, there's some lush areas, but there's some areas where it's like, hey, dude, it might be time just to shave.
Do the Jason Statham.
Exactly, yeah. Just you're losing it anyway. Just let it go. Yeah, especially up where they said they're already heading down, like towards the top. It gets real sparse, but
yeah, so
it's not too. Yeah, it's definitely not thick.
The lead investigator for the case definitely calls out the fact that this isn't like a super thick forest like some of the other cases we've done in like the Pacific Northwest where it's incredibly thick to hike through.
Yeah, and there aren't like huge drop-offs or anything like that. It's very like it reminds me when we were in Montana, we went across Flat Top Mountain.
Yeah.
Like you almost didn't know you were climbing a mountain. It was just so wide open.
Yeah, and I mean you can see in this map that there are very rugged parts of this area, but not
where the trail is. Yeah.
So in all, there were over 19 missions in this area looking for. They searched all the trails in the surrounding areas on both sides of the Bitterroot Valley, and Barbara is still classified as a missing person. So 3 weeks after Barbara went missing, the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office announced that it was offering a cash reward for any information leading to her whereabouts. Although a number of tips were called in, including several from people who believe Barbara had been abducted by a phantom mountain man. None of them brought investigators any closer to finding Barbara.
No one thought she was absorbed into the mountain?
By the rock people?
Yes.
No,
just a phantom mountain man?
Honestly, Joe, when we get into theories, I think by the end of this...
that won't seem so funny anymore?
It might be plausible. I mean, this one...
Hey, that rock one, I was like, I'm starting to believe rock people.
I mean, there's really two ways this can go. I won't get into it just yet, but...
All right, just
we're getting closer.
We're getting closer. I'm starting to get excited, too. I understand why you want to rush.
So I just got some statements from Perry Johnson, the lead investigator on this disappearance. He had a couple of statements at the end of this search. I'm going to read verbatim kind of what he said. So his first statement was, "This is a really tough one for me," Johnson said. "It's outside of my scope of experience. I haven't been able to find anyone else who's had a similar experience. We're talking about a minute, and then you look back and she's gone." He goes on to say, "This area isn't tightly timbered, and there is a lot of loose shale and rock around it. It's hard to creep quietly across that loose shale rock," Johnson said. "You'd make some noise. Just the fact that someone simply disappears like that is cause for concern." He says, "I just don't have that life experience." He said, "How could that possibly happen?" So Johnson goes on to say that he believes a key to this case lies in identifying the two young men that were hiking that trail that day. But they go on to say, and I think this is important to mention, they stress that the men were not considered suspects in her disappearance. They were considered a potential witness, and detectives wanted to talk to them about what they might have seen that day. And an interesting thing, over this period of time, around the 18th, there was a marathon going on in the area. So one of the theories why those two guys were even out there was because they were in the area to run the marathon, and in their off time, they were going to go do some hiking. And
based on the reports, it's a really cool, beautiful hike. So they probably would have been recommended, like, oh, go up to Bear Creek Trail because it's great overlook.
Yeah, and they were young, fit guys, so you could see them running in the marathon. So other than Jim, those two guys were the only people who could verify that Barbara had even been there that day. Yeah. So the construction workers had never seen her.
And they had a dog. Dog people are already a little bit better than not dog people. Yeah. And there goes half our audience.
Yeah. There goes the cat people.
Yep, there goes all the cat people.
So, he went on to say that he assumed those two guys were local because of their Missoula license plates and the fact that they're hiking on a Wednesday morning. Jim, since the disappearance, Jim returned to California but continued to cooperate with the investigation.
So they didn't think he had anything to do with it.
No, he was not a suspect.
Okay.
Johnson goes on to say that he's been very cooperative, returned all of their calls. He's stayed in contact with us until something happens. We find Barbara or find her body. I think he's just a witness. So that was a direct comment from the lead investigator. And he goes, I want to be fair to Jim. There's no evidence he did anything to Barbara. So, and also, I want to make note that Jim was a trusted family acquaintance, according to Barbara's husband, Carl, and was the last person to see Barbara. So,
I don't think that could mean anything.
I mean,
usually weird crimes happen with people that are close to the person. So I'm just
one interesting tidbit here before we start into theories, and I got this from a forum that linked to a news article that obviously the article now doesn't work. So take it with a grain of salt. I have not been able to verify.
Did they cite the article or did they copy and paste from the article in the forum post?
They copied and pasted this snippet from an article that when I click to it, it gives you the 404 screen.
So we're assuming he copied it directly, but there's a potential that the user could have changed some words.
Yeah.
That's our disclaimer.
Yeah.
But assuming he copied from the article directly, go ahead.
According to this news article that it doesn't work anymore because it was, 15 years ago?
Yeah.
One of the SAR members on the first mission in there claims that he was asked and told by the sheriff to stop his search for Barbara, and when he refused, was fired. So that's all I have. I mean, I can't. I have not verified that in any other news article about this case. Just to add a little conspiracy.
Well, conspiracy, but also as someone who's employed people.
Yeah,
I could be like, okay, is he telling his story? Because I know we've had to get rid of some bad employees that were very bad, and then they go on Glassdoor and write a review, and then you can't really comment on it, and what they say is not 100%. It's was this guy a jerk and terrible at it, and then they fired him, and he's like, I wanted to keep doing it. I thought or maybe he I again, it could be that it's a conspiracy too. I'm just trying to throw some shade on the other side to say, what if he's just a bad person, he did a bad job and they kicked him off?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, go on. Sorry.